Welcome to District Command Central, your go-to source for the latest news and updates on the Washington Commanders. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, so you never miss a play when you look at where the Washington Commanders are right now. With the season already slipping through their fingers, and the playoff picture completely out of reach, it would be easy for fans to mentally check out and start fast-forwarding straight into the off-season conversations, the mock drafts, the free agency dreams, and the endless debates about coaching staff changes and roster overhauls. But this final stretch of games still matters a lot, especially for a franchise trying to figure out who belongs in the building moving forward. And that is exactly why the long-awaited debut of defensive end Drake Jackson suddenly becomes one of the most intriguing storylines of the entire week as Washington prepares to face the Philadelphia Eagles at home. On Saturday, Drake Jackson's journey to this moment has been anything but simple, and it carries the kind of narrative weight that football fans love to latch onto, because it is a story about patience, setbacks, belief, and unfinished potential, all wrapped into one young player who is still only 24 years old and feels like he has far more football ahead of him than behind him, despite already having endured one of the most difficult injuries a defensive lineman can suffer. Jackson has not appeared in a single NFL game since the 2023 season, after a torn patellar tendon derailed his career path and forced him to spend all of 2024 on the sideline, watching, rehabbing, and wondering when he would finally get another chance to prove himself, coming into the league as a second-round pick in the 2020 draft out of USC. Jackson was once viewed as a high-upside pass rusher with explosive traits, length, and the kind of first step that can stress offensive tackles when he is healthy and confident. And even though his role with the San Francisco 49ers was mostly rotational during his first 2 seasons, there were flashes that made evaluators believe there was more there. In just 23 career games, Jackson managed to record 6 sacks and 5 tackles for loss, numbers that do not jump off the page but hint at what he could become with consistent snaps and development. And that promise is exactly what made his knee injury so frustrating for both him and the organization that drafted him. When the 49ers ultimately decided to waive Jackson in May, it was a tough but understandable decision for a team built to contend every single year, one that cannot afford to wait indefinitely on a player coming off such a serious injury. And that moment marked a crossroads in Jackson's career. He took visits with other teams in October, weighing his options and trying to find the right fit before eventually choosing to sign with the Washington Commanders, a franchise in transition, looking for upside plays and long-term answers rather than immediate finished products. Almost immediately after arriving in Washington, Jackson was placed on injured reserve so he could continue his rehab, a move that underscored just how cautious the team wanted to be with his recovery and how long the road back truly was. A month later, Jackson finally made his practice debut, a quiet milestone that did not generate many headlines but represented a massive step forward for the player himself. And as his 21-day practice window began ticking down, the Commanders had to decide whether he was close enough to activate. They ultimately did just before that window expired, even though everyone involved understood that he would still need additional time to ramp up to true game speed, to trust his knee, and to regain the timing and conditioning that only live reps can provide. Now, weeks later, head coach Dan Quinn has confirmed that the moment has finally arrived, and Jackson will suit up and take the field for his Commanders' debut against the Eagles. Quinn made it clear that the decision was not rushed and that Jackson earned this opportunity with his work in practice, explaining that he had a good week and that the individual work had been building toward this specific game as a logical point to let him go. And those words carry weight because Quinn has repeatedly emphasized the importance of evaluating young players during these final games. With a 4-10 record and 3 games left on the schedule, Washington is no longer playing for wins in the traditional sense, but for clarity, for answers, and for building blocks. And Jackson represents a potential roster win if he can stay healthy and show that the explosiveness he once had is still there. There is also a very real sense of need at defensive end, a position group that has been absolutely ravaged by injuries throughout the year, forcing the Commanders to constantly shuffle bodies and roles just to get through games. Recent acquisitions like Clelin Ferrell and Keon White have brought some stability, but even that group has been dealing with minor injuries, making depth and fresh legs incredibly valuable down the stretch. Jackson will not be asked to carry the defense or play an overwhelming number of snaps in his first game back, especially after such a long layoff. But his presence alone adds another option to the rotation and gives the coaching staff something meaningful to evaluate on film. The matchup itself also provides an interesting test, because the Eagles bring a physical offensive front that will challenge Jackson immediately, forcing him to hold up against the run while also seeing if he can generate any kind of pressure. As a pass rusher, after a major knee injury and an extensive recovery process, there is no guarantee that a player will return to his previous form, let alone surpass it, and that uncertainty is exactly why this debut is being handled with caution. Still, football careers often turn on moments like this, and a strong showing, even in limited snaps, could go a long way toward changing the perception of Jackson within the organization. For Washington, this is about more than just one game or one player. It is about setting the foundation for the offseason and beyond. The defense clearly needs a lot of work, starting with finding the right defensive coordinator and then reworking the roster to fit that vision, and defensive end stands out as the biggest need on the entire unit, with Dietrich Wise and Dorrance Armstrong both suffering season-ending injuries and potentially missing significant time at the start of the 2026 season. The urgency to find reliable edge defenders could not be clearer. General Manager Adam Peters will have to be aggressive, whether that means free agency, the draft, or both. And Jackson's performance over the next few weeks could factor into those decisions. At 6'4" and 273 pounds, Jackson has the physical profile of an every-down defensive end if he can stay healthy. And in a perfect scenario, he could develop into a foundational piece while other veterans rotate in to keep the pass rush fresh. That should not stop the Commanders from swinging big in the offseason, but it would certainly help if they can answer at least one major roster question internally. And that is what makes this debut so anticipated. For a team desperate to see its young talent step up, for a coach focused on building a competitive culture, and for a player trying to reclaim his career after a long and painful setback, Saturday represents far more than just another late-season game. It represents opportunity, evaluation, and the possibility that something promising could finally be taking shape in Washington. If you're enjoying the coverage, make sure to smash that like button and drop a comment with your thoughts on the Commanders' latest moves. We want to hear from you. When a voice like Terry McLaurin's finally decides to step out of the comfortable silence that surrounds the league, it does not land like a simple quote. It lands like a tremor that people feel before they fully understand what just moved beneath their feet. This is not being treated as an official statement carved in stone, but more like a whispered confession that somehow found a microphone, and once it did, it started spreading through locker rooms, front offices, group chats, and betting circles that usually pretend not to overlap. McLaurin, known publicly for discipline and focus, is now being linked to words that cut against the polished surface of the modern league, suggesting that the explosion of betting culture is quietly bending the soul of the game in ways that nobody wants to discuss out loud. The rumor goes that he did not shout, he did not accuse, and he did not point fingers at specific teams or players, which somehow made the message even heavier. According to people who claim to have been close to the conversation, McLaurin spoke with the calm tone of someone who has watched patterns repeat too many times to ignore. He allegedly described how the constant presence of odds, parlays, and prop bets changes the emotional temperature of every snap instead of pure competition. There is now an invisible audience judging moments not by effort or intelligence, but by whether a single catch, a single yard, or a single decision helped or destroyed a bet. In that atmosphere, the game stops being just football and starts becoming a performance under suspicion. What makes this rumor powerful is not that fans already know betting exists. Everyone does. But that a respected player is supposedly admitting how deeply it seeps into the experience of playing. The league promotes responsibility, transparency, and integrity. Yet at the same time, it is surrounded by sponsorships, commercials, and constant reminders that money is riding on every movement. McLaurin's words, as they are being read old, suggest that players feel this contradiction every time they step on the field. They hear chants, see social media messages, and feel pressure that has nothing to do with winning or losing, but everything to do with someone else's wallet. There is also a darker layer to this speculation, one that people whisper about rather than state directly. The idea is not that games are openly fixed, but that betting subtly alters incentives, focus, And trust. McLaurin is rumored to have mentioned how a dropped pass no longer feels like a personal failure alone, but like a spark that ignites anger from strangers who believe they were owed a certain outcome. That kind of environment can poison relationships between players and fans, turning what used to be shared passion into transactional frustration. The fear is not of corruption in the classic sense, but of erosion, the slow wearing away of purity until nobody remembers what the game felt like before. Round the league, reactions are said to be mixed. Some veterans allegedly nodded quietly, as if someone finally said what had been sitting in their chests for years. Younger players, raised in a world where betting apps are as normal as highlight clips, reportedly feel conflicted, unsure whether this is just a new reality or something worth pushing back against. Front offices, according to rumor, prefer not to touch the subject at all, because betting revenue has become intertwined with the business side of football in a way that feels impossible to unwind in that silence. McLaurin's comments echo louder, precisely because they challenge something everyone profits from, but few feel comfortable defending openly. This situation also exposes a tension between image and reality. The league sells drama, unpredictability, and authenticity, yet betting reduces moments to probabilities and outcomes that must satisfy numerical expectations. McLaurin is rumored to have questioned how authenticity can survive when every play is framed through odds rather than intention, when players feel they are being watched not as competitors but as variables. Something fundamental shifts. The speculation suggests that he worries about younger athletes learning to play under that shadow, internalizing external pressures that have nothing to do with teamwork or growth. What keeps this story alive is that it does not end with a neat conclusion. There is no official response that fully addresses the concern, no sweeping reform promised, and no clear villain to blame. Instead, there is just this uncomfortable feeling that someone respected pulled back a curtain and showed a room nobody wanted to acknowledge. Whether the league chooses to confront that room or quietly close the curtain again remains an open question. For now, McLaurin's rumored words circulate like a cautionary tale, reminding everyone that when money becomes too closely tied to competition, the cost may not show up on a balance sheet, but in the trust, joy, and meaning of the game itself. Thanks for tuning into District Command Central. Make sure to subscribe and follow us for all the Commanders news you need. Until next time, keep the faith and hail to the Commanders.